Good morning, welcome back. Google denying a New York Post report that said it's in talks with Dish Network to create a new U.S. wireless carrier as part of the potential Sprint T-Mobile merger. Google telling 9 to 5 Google the report is simply false. But what is behind Silicon Valley's interest in entering the telecom sector? Let's discuss with Dan Morgan from Synovus Trust. Dan, good morning to you. Do you believe any of this story?
Good morning, Woolford. No, it's just kind of breaking. It hasn't really been confirmed at this point. To me, it would just look, Woolford, as an effort on Google's behalf to try to kind of spread out their business model a little bit, not to be so focused just on the online search advertising space. You guys have well documented issues with, regulators coming in on the antitrust side and so forth and taking a hard look at it. So I think it's just an effort on their behalf to try to expand out a little bit more on their current model.
But it would be a very capital-heavy, low-margin business for them to enter, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and also very competitive. So it's kind of different than what we think of Google in terms of driverless vehicles and some of these other things that they've been getting involved with. So it is kind of a strange connection for them to make. It's something kind of unexpected that we would look for from them in terms of expanding their business model.
Switching focus slightly, how serious do you think is the antitrust threat to the likes of Google at the moment? Who's under the spotlight most of all?
Well, the antitrust thing to me is a little out there, Wilford. If you look at not only Google but also Facebook, I mean, what are you really going to do? Are you going to extract their search capabilities from their driverless vehicles, from their cloud platform? They're involved in many different things. Same thing with Facebook. Are you going to break it up into Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger, and then the core Facebook? And then you're going to break it up into their new Libra, which is their new currency, so cryptocurrency exchange business that they're attempting to get into. So I don't know how you break these things up in terms of getting around this antitrust issue.
What about internationally? Did you see some stories last week, whether it was the UK or France, that in Europe it does seem to be ever-growing pressure on those big US tech companies?
Well, Wilford, Europe is always much more stringent than the US in regards to these types of issues. They seem to be always having something on a regulatory front with a lot of these large technology companies. So it doesn't surprise me that they're pushing towards it. You've been around a little bit like I have in the tech space. May remember back in the late 1990s when Microsoft was also under a tremendous amount of scrutiny. They were going to break up the Explorer from the Word, all the different desktop functions and so forth, and that kind of just played out, and there really was no big effect on Microsoft. So I don't know if it's going to have the same negative effect that the market is anticipating, even with the inroads that you may expect over in Europe.
Hey, Dan, you got FANG coming right in front of us here with earnings over the next couple of weeks. What do you expect? Can that trade get back to some sort of sustainability, catch up to maybe some of the moves that the chips and software stocks have done?
Well, you're right. I mean, we're going to kick things off here a week from Tuesday, July 18th. You'll have Netflix coming in with numbers, the first of the FANG stocks. It's kind of a muted picture, as you know, within the group. You have Apple, who's under a lot of pressure. You've got companies that are all kind of the same, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, which should have relatively decent numbers. Facebook's bottom line number will be hurt a little bit by their increase in terms of security. And you would expect good numbers out of Netflix. So, it's within the FANG, so to speak, or FANG, however you want to pronounce it, you've got some different forces. But, I would think Netflix would hopefully kick things off well next Tuesday with good numbers, which will then roll into some of these other reports as we kind of proceed through the next couple of weeks.
And more generally, Dan, obviously there's been a lot more divergence in performance. We were talking about Alphabet. That's been a real laggard. It's been punished since its earnings early this year. Where would you decide that maybe the market has it wrong on some of these, either for an opportunity to buy or just something that's maybe overloved at this point?
Well, again, the FANG is a very small group. I mean, we like the cloud stocks. We're expecting good numbers out of the companies like Salesforce and Workday and Amazon. Amazon, obviously, part of the FANG group. In terms of trying to decipher FANG away from chips, away from the information technology benchmark, and trying to determine, who's going to outperform is kind of a difficult question. But within technology, there's definitely areas of opportunity, and then there's other areas, like you mentioned, that are having some difficulties with antitrust and privacy issues. And of course, we all know about what's going on with the chip sector.
Dan, if there's one sector of the market that's very exposed to international growth rates, tariffs, trade, it's technology. Who do you think is more susceptible to that sort of weakness?
Well, I think it's really the chip sector. I mean, if we go into this upcoming earnings report season we're going to have here next week, second quarter, semiconductors expect to be down 31%. We all know about the tariffs, Huawei. We know about the slowdown in the smartphone business, benign PC growth. The list goes on and on. So that's probably the most difficult group within technology and probably going to face the most headwinds, like you said, from the international side in terms of all the things that have been going on.
In terms of, Dan, Amazon, just wanted to mention the fact that it hit 25 years, of course, last week. Where do you see the next significant period of time taking it? Is the share price a little stretched or not?
Well, Woolford, we still like Amazon because of the cloud, focus they have with AWS. As you know, they're the leader in infrastructure as a service. Last quarter, they grew that segment by about 41%. So we would expect Amazon to continue to morph itself away from kind of what we consider their core business as they kind of expand out into these other things. You guys have well documented their efforts into getting into the pharmaceutical distribution business. They've gotten into all kinds of things. So to me, the future for them is really the cloud, because that is by far the most exciting aspect of their business. It actually encompasses a very small portion of their sales, but it actually has about 52% of their overall operating profits actually come from AWS. So that is an area that we feel very strongly about in regards to Amazon going into the future.
Which company on the list of the FANGs and who are going to report you think are most at risk? And I ask you that on a morning when Apple got downgraded to a sell at Rosenblatt, and they're talking about the fundamentals of the company deteriorating over the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Apple is by far the company that is going to be under the most heat. You've had a couple of brokerage firms downgrade them, as you mentioned before. Their issues are continuing to mount. If you start to get into costs associated with these tariffs, either bringing parts into China or shipping out the end product back out of China, do they then start to squeeze their margins down on their iPhones or other products, or do they try to raise prices when prices have already increased? They're at the higher level in terms of competitive against other smartphone providers. So I think within the FANG group, to me, Apple is probably the one that's going to be the most difficult going forward into this upcoming quarter, just because of the issues that we've talked about.